You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday 28th of November 2014. Commuters told to run, hide and tell in leaflet distributed by police warning of Mumbai-style gun terror attacks at train stations. Russian Navy holds exercises in the English Channel. The Netherlands' newest accomplishment, a national Islamist party. Women are not equal to men, it is against nature to put them on an equal footing. Turkish president stuns crowd at women's rights conference. Nick Griffin's statement on the third part of the way forward. Uncle shoots his niece dead because she refused to turn down her loud music when he visited her house in Pakistan. Ferguson, Missouri cop Darren Wilson cleared by grand jury. Thought for the day, just a few, very short opinions. And finally, a joke for the devil. UK news. Commuters told to run, hide and tell in leaflet distributed by police warnings of Mumbai-style gun terror attacks at train stations. Police are taking to railway stations to tell passengers what to do in the event of a Mumbai-style terrorist attack at one of Britain's busy terminals. After government warnings that the threat to Britain from Islamist fanatics is greater than ever, officers handed out leaflets telling the public to run, hide and tell if they're caught up in an attack. The flyer, which has been attacked as scaremongering by critics, shows images of worried-looking people running down flights of stairs, cowering in the dark and anxiously talking on their mobile phones. Police have been handing out leaflets to tell people to run, hide and tell if they're caught up in this sort of attack. The campaign comes as a sweeping package of measures to tackle the threat from homegrown extremists, and those returning from fighting with ISIS is set to go before Parliament. Launching the campaign, Chief Constable of British Transport Police, BTP, Paul Crowther said, more than 6 million people travel on our railways every single day. For commuters who make the same journey over and over again, it can be easy to become oblivious to their surroundings. But I would urge them to remain alert, use their instincts and have the confidence to report anything that strikes them as out of place or suspicious. World at 8. Well, yes, of course, it's going to be much easier now to spot the average Muslim in a crowd, especially if he or she is carrying a ruddy great bag, isn't it? Stupids, shutting the stable door long after the horse has bolted. But of course one cannot run and hide from a bomb or poison gas attack, and will the leaflet be printed in as many languages as our benefits forms? Russian Navy holds exercises in the English Channel. Russian naval vessels have staged a drill in the English Channel according to a state news agency. RIA Novosti reported that the Northern Fleet Squadron, led by the anti-submarine ship Feromorsk, had passed through the Straits of Dover after a week of exercises in the North Sea. They were watched by the patrol ship HMS Tyne and complied with all orders as she stayed clear of British territorial water. The 4 ships, which also include a landing craft, a rescue tugboat and a tank ship, have now moved into neutral waters at Seine Bay as they wait for a storm to pass. While it is anchored, the crew are undertaking a series of exercises on how to tackle infiltrating submarine forces and are training on survival techniques in the case of flooding or fire, RIA quoted the Northern Fleet as saying. The Russian task force announced that it was off the northern coast of France just days after President François Hollande said he would not hand over a helicopter carrier being built for the Russian Navy. France had been under pressure from allies for months to scrap the £950 million contract because of Russia's actions in Ukraine, which have resulted in tough economic sanctions being imposed on Moscow. A Russian crew was already aboard the first of the 2 French-made ships to be named Vladivostok in Saint-Nazaire to begin the process of familiarisation. Construction of the second vessel, to be named after the Crimean port city of Sevastopol, is understood to remain on track. Russia has threatened it could sue if the vessels are not delivered. France's Navy confirmed the location of the Russian ships in the Channel. They are not holding exercises, they're just waiting in a zone where they can be several times a year, the Naval Information Service said. In May, the Royal Navy deployed a destroyer to track a large Russian task force, including the country's only aircraft carrier that was moving through the Channel. Although Russian naval vessels frequently use the waters between Britain and France, the presence of a northern fleet and the announcement of its manoeuvres highlights the tensions between the West and Russia. Earlier this month, NATO said its member nations had scrambled aircraft 400 times this year to respond to a 50% increase in Russian military activity. Moscow was also suspected of being behind a mysterious vessel thought to be a submarine, which was spotted in the waters of Sweden in October. World at 8. Oh, perhaps we should send one of our pathetic carriers on exercises with all the pregnant female naval personnel on board. Oh, how are the mighty fallen. European news. The Netherlands' newest accomplishment, a national Islamic party. The first national Muslim party in the Netherlands is now a fact. The Netherlands, that country that so bravely pioneered movements such as gay marriage and the legalisation of marijuana, seem on the brink of pioneering yet another, the official Islamisation of Europe's parliaments. That, anyway, would seem to be the wish of Tunahan Kuzu and Selçuk Öztürk, the founders of the country's newest political party, which they established only a few days ago after splitting from the Partij van Arbeid, PVDA, or Labour Party, in a dispute over Dutch-Turkish organisations and the Dutch-Turkish community at large. Although their party, Group Kuzu/Öztürk, has not yet been entirely defined, its creators describe it in sweeping terms as the party the Netherlands longs for, aimed at promoting a society in which everyone is treated equally. Except that does not seem to be what they actually have in mind. According to observations of former PVDA colleagues in local media reports, both Öztürk and Kuzu have shown clear antagonism towards women, even intimidating their female colleagues. More significantly, the two have also held tightly to their Turkish roots and Islamic faith, demanding, among other things, Islamic prayer spaces in the Parliament building, a clear violation of separation between church and state. Those demands, it should be noted, were refused. An Öztürk, reported the National Daily Telegraph, has regularly demonstrated a stronger allegiance to Turkey and to Islam than to the secular Dutch state he was elected to represent. On at least one occasion, for instance, he skipped a day of parliamentary voting and explained his absence only the following day with the casual remark that yesterday was a Muslim holiday. Öztürk, who defended the Turkish government's violent backlash against protesters during the 2013 Gezi riots, has also demonstrated particularly strong support for Turkey's Islamist president and former Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, again indicating a greater solidarity with Turkey and its current regime than with the Netherlands. World at 8. Bollocks! Since when has anything to do with Islam treated anyone with equality? Regardless of what sect these people are, women, non-Muslims or animals are not treated with respect and in fact with hatred and indifference, whatever country they crawl to. Get real, Nederlanders. Women are not equal to men. It is against nature to put them on equal footing. Turkish President stuns crowd at Women's Rights Conference. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has set off a new controversy, declaring that women are not equal to men and accusing feminists of not understanding the special status that Islam attributes to mothers. Addressing a meeting Monday in Istanbul on women and justice, Erdogan said men and women are created differently, that women cannot be expected to undertake the same work as men, and that mothers enjoy a high position that only they can reach. He said you cannot put women and men on an equal footing. It is against nature. They were created differently. Their nature is different. Their constitution is different. Erdogan told the audience of Turkish women, which included his own daughter, Sümeyye, that Islam has defined a position for women in society, motherhood. Some people cannot understand this, while others can't, he added. You cannot explain this to feminists because they do not accept the concept of motherhood. He recalled, I would kiss my mother's feet because they smelled of paradise. She would glance coyly and cry sometimes. Motherhood is something else. The president went on to say that women's characters, habits and physiques are different. You cannot place a mother breastfeeding her baby on an equal footing with men. You cannot get women to do every kind of work that men do, as in communist regimes. You cannot tell them to go out and dig the soil. This is against their delicate nature. A devout Muslim himself, Erdogan often courts controversy with divisive public comments. He raised a few eyebrows this month by declaring that Muslims had discovered the Americans before Christopher Columbus. Oh, world at 8, oh bless him. Apart from the fact that the Americas were not founded by Islam, which is why there were no vast colonies of Muslims or mosques when the first colonists arrived from Europe, says it all. However, he does have a point in the physical differences of men and women. Mentally, a woman can do a good job as a man and get the same money, but physically, unless she's built like a Russian shot putter, a woman cannot do manual work like a fellow. Fact of life. I now hand you over to Nick Griffin for the third and final part of his way forward. I hope you will find the sound adjustments we have made make this recording much easier to listen to.
The Way Ahead Part 3. What sort of organisation do we need? And is there a role for an electioneering party? If you want political power, the way to begin the quest for it is to ask, under what circumstances do we envisage coming to power? Because until that question's answered, debates or decisions about what kind of new organisation is needed are uninformed hot air. This chapter of my Way Ahead blueprint for the renewal of our struggle will therefore examine one by one the possible circumstances in which nationalism could conceivably win in the UK or a similar Western state. While in reality these would probably overlap to a degree, logic tells us that in broad brushstroke terms there are four primary scenarios. I'll examine each one in turn, together with an equally brief outline of the kind of organisation best suited to exploit each of these different sets of circumstances. Option 1. Slow and steady change. A slow decline in support for the old established parties, paralleled by a steady rise in support for the nationalist alternative, leading to a fairly fought democratic election in which the nationalists win and the old elite quietly hand over the keys to state power. In the unlikely event that anyone reading this actually believes that this fairy tale could come true, I refer them to the experience of the Vlaams Blok, the Flemish Nationalist Party, which became the largest party in Belgium, only to be banned in order to protect democracy. More recently, the undemocratic ruthlessness of European Union, US puppet regimes has been shown once again in Greece. The success of the radical nationalist Golden Dawn in securing just 10% of the popular vote was enough to lead to the EU and the massively powerful US Zionist lobby ordering their puppets in Greece to crush the nationalist advance through a mixture of legal assaults and murderous levels of violence. At the time of writing, Golden Dawn is still alive, despite having two young activists murdered in cold blood in a failed attempt to provoke a violent reaction, 78 of its leaders imprisoned without trial on totally trumped up charges, and all of its funding withdrawn. The unanimous approval of the entire Western political and media elite for such a cynical attack on the very principles of freedom and democracy make it very clear that there's not the faintest prospect of the current rulers of the nations of the West obeying the rules if nationalists look like winning the game. To make the conventional, purely parliamentary road even more unrealistic, it's now very clear that the neocon-dominated mass media have perfected the promotion of pro-globalist safety valve parties. From Sweden to Spain, from the UK to Poland, parties on the same wavelength as UKIP are shamelessly promoted by the controlled media, hijacking the imagery, slogans and votes of their genuinely nationalist rivals. Starved of the oxygen of publicity, recruitment and hope, nationalist parties which persist in seeing elections as the only, or even just as the primary measure of success and road to power, are gradually being asphyxiated. The new BNP leadership response to this is typical of the brain-dead reaction of a number of the old-style nationalist parties. They're still stuck in the old days when we were the only ones the public could see offering an anti-establishment choice on politically incorrect issues such as immigration. Now that the safety valve parties are hoovering up their votes and their potential new activists, all these people do is come out with glib but worthless reassurances that it will all be okay at some stage in the future. Quote, don't worry, UKIP will fail to deliver or end up disgraced in coalition, and then we'll take all their votes, sweep to power and put everything right again. Unquote. What complete and utter claptrap. Why? First, because as we've already seen in Belgium and Greece, even if a real nationalist party was to find the political space to make real electoral progress, the liberal democratic response will simply be to forbid it from standing altogether, or so handicap it that the electoral process becomes a one-sided farce. Second, because even if UKIP does hit the buffers in a couple of years, which is quite likely, but unless the nationalist movement has made massive progress in building a powerful social media alternative to the system's controlled media, and in building real grassroots community support, then UKIP will simply be replaced by another licensed rebellion safety valve. I'm sure you'll be aware of several suitable candidates already in place. So while a normal elections-based political party would be the way to go if the slow and steady scenario was realistic, it isn't. So that's an end to it. Option 2. Sudden crisis, resulting in a collapse of the elite's hold on power. There are several triggers which could conceivably lead to this. Financial collapse, leading to economic catastrophe, war, a global disease pandemic, or some massive scandal hitting all the parties of government simultaneously. Any or all of these are clearly possible. While the specifics would vary hugely, what we can say for sure is that any one of them would bring scenes of chaos and unspeakable suffering to millions of people. What sort of organisation would be needed to win the trust of hard-pressed communities under such circumstances? Would an electioneering-based party, which is seen as just another bunch of politicians making promises, really cut the mustard? Or would people be looking for something able to organise local communities to deal with the antisocial elements which would thrive under most of those circumstances? And looking at the way in which Islamist parties such as Hamas gain massive support by providing some kind of replacement for welfare safety nets shredded by austerity, is it not logical to suppose that the same dynamics would operate here too in the event of a systemic collapse? Thus, if we consider such a drastic collapse to be the most realistic path to nationalist power, we're forced to the conclusion that the right party to advance on that road will, long in advance of the crisis, have set about creating parallel organic structures with which it grows deep community roots, and which can at the right time be mobilised to replace the core institutions of the failed liberal state. Very clearly, an elections-based party can't do that. Option 3. Drastic and growing clashes between the pro-British majority and Islamists and allied alienated immigrants. If the streets are steadily or suddenly turned into those long prophesied rivers of blood, what then? Would a nice little election sort it all out when Islamist mobs are rampaging through virtually every city and town in Britain? Honestly, if you really think so, you're wasting our time. And yours, even looking at this. Go away and take up stamp collecting or something where that naivety won't harm anyone else except yourself and your family. Because to the rest of us, it's already perfectly obvious that under scenario 3, what would be needed would be very different from the soft, timid, respectable party, which is the creature that both suits and comes from an overemphasis on electioneering. Option 4. Popular disgust with a terminally corrupt and incompetent political elite leading to a mass rebellion. Massive demonstrations, tax strikes, withdrawal of consent by the government, anti-government riots, the police and army changing sides, leading to a loss of nerve and flight by the old elite. From the chaos in France in 1968 through to the Arab Spring rebellions and most recently the Maidan coup in Ukraine, this is the most common pattern for truly drastic political change. The fact that all these examples were in fact artificial, CIA-created coloured revolutions doesn't mean that the same model couldn't lead to a nationalist victory. Indeed, in the light of the examples above, it could be seen as the most realistic option, which is one of the reasons why the liberal elite are so keen on immigration, precisely because it creates a natural anti-nationalist bloc to such changes. Perhaps the most accurate assessment is that this model at present remains a real possibility in the majority of Western European states, but that its feasibility will steadily diminish as the demographic balance tilts further and further against the indigenous populations. The mass protest model could well also be relevant in conjunction with any of the other options listed here, providing as it might the final push to oust a discredited regime already brought to its knees by other forms of mass action. In either case, the key requirements for the revolutionary cadres would be experience and capability in organising well-disciplined mass demonstrations, together with the ability to appeal to, as well as face down, the forces on which the old regime would try to rely. Once again, the election-focused party, with its inevitable tendency to maximise votes through conciliation and moderation in all things, is incapable of even seeing what needs to be done, let alone organising to do it. Option 5. Piecemeal infiltration of nationalist ideas into the body politic, aided by coordinated steps to create alternative centres of power to those of the old elite. The safety valve parties discussed in scenario 1 may well turn out in the end to be destined to play an important role in the historical process and the eventual nationalist victory. Because the phenomenon of things like UKIP is so new, we can't say for sure that, once they set adrift to the right in motion, it will stop with them. Particularly in an age where the internet is steadily and irreversibly replacing the old controlled media as the main force in shaping public opinion, it's quite possible that a positive feedback loop could begin a virtuous circle. As nationalist ideas become legitimised, more people feel able to espouse them and act on them, while sections of the old elite feel compelled to go along with them, leading to their further legitimisation, and so on. There are indeed already signs that such a societal shift is already underway. This process could be hugely speeded up if nationalists make a conscious effort to stop wasting energy on futile attempts to compete with the pseudo-patriots in elections still decided at present by the controlled media. It could well be far more productive to invest instead in the creation of alternative media reach and on completely and potentially very appealing new fronts such as monetary reform, and to influence the rank and file of the safety valve parties. In this option 2, therefore, sticking stubbornly to the failed old electioneering tactics of the conventional political party will be not merely futile, but actively counterproductive. Indeed, we would need an organisation that searches for and exploits opportunities for such counterpower initiatives and to influence and so radicalise the safety valve parties. If we can turn them from obstacles into springboards, the whole operation to create them could in the end turn out to have been too clever by half. So there we have 5 possible paths to the national revolution. The first is clearly closed. The other 4, alone or in combination, are all potentially realistic to one degree or another. No one can be sure. But we can be certain that the sort of election-based party on which nationalists have pinned their faith from the 1960s until now is not fit for purpose under any of these circumstances. As this is understood, some people may conclude that we don't need an electioneering nationalist political party as part of the bigger overall nationalist movement at all. Considering what we've just looked at, such a view is as understandable as it is mistaken, because electioneering, through something which at least looks and sounds like an old-fashioned political party, remains, at the right time, absolutely essential. Here are 5 reasons why. 1. Elected local government and parliamentary democracy are at the very heart of the identity and traditions of our nation. Indeed, individual freedom and the resulting sovereignty of the people are ingrained in the very DNA of our race. The fact that this has been corrupted is not a reason to act out of character and destroy it. Rather, we have a moral and a political duty to work to restore and revitalise true democracy. 2. People expect it. The conception of elections as the way to change society, even amongst those who don't vote and think that the democratic vote process as it stands at present is an obsolete sham, is so strong that the vast majority of the population are incapable of visualising any lasting change except through the ballot box. Any organisation which tries to tell them otherwise will be regarded either as mad, bad, or both. 3. Defence against repression. A political organisation that forswore elections would set itself up to be demonised and broken up by the powers that be. 4. It would be seen by the population as a whole as a threat to their right, be it ever so threadbare and undervalued, to choose and dismiss their masters at the ballot box. Elected local government and parliamentary democracy may have terrible flaws, but it's a far better and innately more popular system than any of the potential alternatives. 5. Most important of all, we need to understand this. Electoral victories do not create political power, because in reality that power comes from cultural, ideological, social, economic and technological changes. But elections are the most powerful marker and register of such deeper and broader changes. Electoral victory is the ultimate symbolic legitimizer of real-world shifts of power that have already taken place. Elections are the way in which our society stamps its seal of democratic approval on changes that are already all over, save for these legal niceties. For these 5 reasons, the post-BNP, post-election fetish movement must include a properly registered political party. It's just that this party should, in practice, avoid fighting elections until the time to do so is right. When will that be? Sun Tzu would have been able to tell us. When its candidates have as good as won before the campaign even starts, because they are so well regarded locally, and because their message resonates with so many voters, and because they already have so many votes guaranteed that they cannot lose. When the election, in other words, is simply the way in which the prior nationalist victory is rubber stamped by the people. How on earth do we do that? I'm going to tell you in the next instalment. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Nick. A great way to finish off a week, and have a very good weekend. World news. Uncle shoots his niece dead because she refused to turn down her loud music when he visited her house in Pakistan. A 16-year-old girl was gunned down by her uncle after she refused to turn down her loud music. Rahana Bibi was killed in her home in the village of Matan Kalan in the Punjab province, Pakistan, after defying her uncle's demands to lower the volume on her tape recorder. 2 bullets were fired at the girl. One hit her in the head while the other on her face. She died on the spot, a police official told local media. Rahana's father, Munsib Khan, told police that on Saturday he'd left home early to go to work. His younger brother, Mohammed Gulistan, came to his house at 10 a.m. The girl, Rahana Bibi, was alone in her home and was listening to music when her uncle, Mohammed Gulistan, came to her house and asked her to lower the volume. Sadat Ali, an official on duty at Kala Kahar police station, told AFP. On her refusal they quarrelled and Gulistan shot her dead, said Mr Ali. Gulistan fled the village after the attack. World at 8. He won't be punished at all. She was family property in the Quran, so it doesn't really count. Ferguson, Missouri cop Darren Wilson cleared by grand jury. Donald Joy of ClashDaily.com writes, the grand jury has found that there is no probable cause to charge white police officer Darren Wilson in the death of Michael Brown, a gargantuan drugged-out gangster rap thug who recorded violent rap songs about killing white cops. The grand jury was comprised of 6 white men, 3 white women, 2 black women and 1 black man. 9 of the 12 jurors would have had to vote to indict Wilson for him to be charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter or involuntary manslaughter. From the earliest stages of this case, it was pretty clear that the evidence was heavily in Officer Darren Wilson's favour, despite the way crack squads of professional race agitators immediately swooped down onto the scene and helped coach various alleged eyewitnesses in concocting their absurd stories, accusing Wilson of having gunned the supposedly harmless gentle giant Brown down in cold blood. Fortunately, based on information which leaked out of the proceedings in recent weeks, sufficient numbers of other, more credible eyewitnesses also testified to the grand jury, and their first-hand accounts corroborated Wilson's version of the incident. According to reports, at least 8 other black eyewitnesses miraculously broke the no-snitching rule and gave accounts which contradicted the shifting stories of the more dubious media posturing figures such as Piaget Crenshaw, Tiffany Mitchell and Brown's robbery accomplice, proven liar, Dorian Johnson. In the days following the shooting, the public was treated to surveillance video from a nearby convenience store showing Michael Brown being anything but harmless and gentle towards the hapless store clerk as Brown plainly committed strong-armed robbery of the store, manhandling and battering the clerk around and clearly threatening him with even worse physical violence. Brown showed us all that he was in fact the aggressive, menacing criminal who caused his own demise at the hands of the 28-year-old street cop Darren Wilson, who wound up with no other option but to defend himself with lethal force. Wilson himself testified at length before the grand jury and were informed by those same leaked reports that his account was supported by the overwhelming abundance of forensic evidence. Those arguing that Wilson murdered Brown say that Wilson shot Brown as Brown allegedly tried to surrender with his hands in the air. The grand jury simply didn't believe that story. They weighed what was presented to them and found that there was nothing which compelled neither of them to find probable cause that Darren Wilson committed murder or manslaughter. Situations like this are why the individual states have National Guard troops. When the President of our entire country and his Attorney General deliberately seek to foment civil unrest and racial violence to fuel their political agenda, armed and trained volunteers are needed to stand in the breach. Word at 8. Gentle giant, my fat wide backside. Looking at his awful parents says it all. Good job done, I say. Thought for the day, just a few very short opinions. I have just a few short statements on the news this week and I'll take them one by one. First, 2 million eligible for gastric bans, which might cost the NHS £12 billion. Get real, stop eating, start moving or live with it. Polish gang allowed over here to beat up English academic. It doesn't matter what this guy was, it was awful, but it's been happening with Asian and West Indian migrants for donkey's years. We allow everyone in this country now. Get used to it or get rid. Pair of jihadis jailed. Ridiculous, send them back to Syria. In fact, send their families as well. They can all fight jihad for all I care. I just don't want to pay for their bed and board for the next few years. And as for the terror expert saying that the Prime Minister's pledge to keep jihadis out will never work, he's right, because we let their parents into the UK in the first place, and all because of the soft soap experts like him. Facebook invading our privacy and shielding terrorists. A real whammy, this one. Like kind and non-invasive immigration, this will never do what it says on the tin. People are stupid enough to paste their private lives or their friends all over the web and they whine because people say nasty things. That is what people do. From the privacy of their homes, they attack. As for terrorists, it's well known that you can organise all manner of terrorist activities from the web on a global level. That is what it was invented for, isn't it? The poor young mother dying because her doctors ignored her symptoms is a true tragedy. Especially if she'd come off the banana boat with Ebola, she'd have been cured. My sympathies to her family and her 2 little boys. You are a brave woman, they're me. Halle Berry and her daughter having her hair straightened, get over it. African American women spend millions of dollars every year on trying not to look African. How is that for black pride? I will close on the white lions. They are just too beautiful for words. And I wish I could see them in person and feed them chunks of Nigel Farage. At least he would then serve some good purpose. And finally, a joke for the devil. While walking down the street one day, a member of Parliament is tragically hit by a truck and dies. His soul arrives in heaven and is met by St. Peter at the entrance. Welcome to heaven, says St. Peter. Before you settle in, it seems there is a problem. We seldom see a high official around these parts, you see, so we're not sure what to do with you. No problem, just let me in, says the man. Well, I'd like to, but I have orders from higher up. What we'll do is have you spend 1 day in hell and 1 in heaven. Then you can choose where to spend eternity. Really, I've made up my mind I want to be in heaven, says the MP. I'm sorry, but we have our rules. And with that, St. Peter escorts him to the elevator and he goes down, down, down to hell. The doors open and he finds himself in the middle of a green golf course. In the distance is a clubhouse and standing in front of it are all his friends and other politicians who'd worked with him. Everyone is very happy and in evening dress. They run to greet him, shake his hand and reminisce about the good times they had while getting rich at the expense of the people. They play a friendly game of golf and then dine on lobster, caviar and champagne. Also present is the devil, who really is a very friendly and nice guy who has a good time dancing and telling jokes. They're having such a good time that before he realises it, it's time to go. Everyone gives him a hearty farewell and waves while the elevator rises. The elevator goes up, 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 and the door reopens on heaven, where St. Peter is waiting for him. Now it's time to visit heaven. So 24 hours pass with the MP joining a group of contented souls, moving from cloud to cloud, playing the harp and singing. They have a good time and before he realises it, the 24 hours have gone by and St. Peter returns. Well, Now you've spent a day in hell and another day in heaven. Now choose your eternity. The MP reflects for a minute, then he answers, well, I would never have said it before. I mean, heaven has been delightful, but I think I would be better off in hell. So St. Peter escorts him to the elevator and he goes down, down, down to hell. Now the doors of the elevator open and he's in the middle of a barren land, covered with waste and garbage. He sees all his friends dressed in rags, picking up the trash and putting it in black bags as more trash falls from above. The devil comes over to him and puts his arm round his shoulder. I don't understand, stammers the MP. Yesterday I was here and there was a golf course and a clubhouse and we ate lobster and caviar and drank champagne and danced and had a great time. Now there's a wasteland full of garbage and my friends look miserable. What happened? The devil looks at him and smiles and says, yesterday we were campaigning. Today you voted. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend.